In that case, then, I think that we should get started in 3, 2, 1.
Good news is there's hope for you, Private. Hope in the form of glorious combat. Battle is the great redeemer, the fiery crucible in which the only true heroes are forged. The one place where all men truly share the same rank, regardless of what kind of parasitic scum they were going in. Squads, this here is Private Cage.
Okay, ready to go.
Hello and welcome. Welcome and hello. This is Wait, You Haven't Seen? It's a show where we talk about movies, and specifically, we talk about a movie at least one of us has never seen before. I am your host, Travis, a.k.a. TV's Travis. This is episode number 208, and our film this week is 2014's Edge of Tomorrow with Tom Cruise, and joining me to talk about it, it's Phil Rood. Phil, how you doing?
I have been living, dying, and repeating all day long. I'm good, Travis. How are you?
I am doing quite well. All right, so Edge of Tomorrow, 2014, starring Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt, directed by Doug Liman, written by a host of people. We'll get into some of the writers in a little bit. But first thing I want to know is, what is your background with this movie? When did you see it for the first time, or was this your first time?
No, I'd seen this probably when it was pretty new to video. And I remember really liking the concept, and that really stuck with me. It's like if Groundhog Day was a war movie, or Groundhog Day and Starship Troopers had a baby, this is what it would be. But I've probably maybe caught bits and pieces of it on cable or something over the years. It blew me away to realize this movie is almost 10 years old now.
Yeah.
But this is today was the first time I've actually sat down and watched it beginning to end, probably since the first time I watched it. Other than that, it's just been bits and pieces, but because everything repeats, you never know exactly where you are in the movie if you just walk into it. But
Yeah,
it's not a real deep history, but yeah, I have seen this before.
Okay. So this was my first time watching the movie. I remember it being marketed, and so this movie came out 2014. It was a year after Tom Cruise had done another sci-fi movie called Oblivion. It was also the year after the Matt Damon movie Elysium, which had Matt Damon in kind of in like an exoskeleton sort of
in a mech suit, yeah,
setup as well. So there was sort of this period for a few years where it felt like every movie coming out had somebody in a mech suit or something. It's just something about it. But I remembered the marketing for this, and it didn't really grab me at the time. And I think part of it was the title, Edge of Tomorrow, didn't tell me anything about what this movie was supposed to be. And it was kind of, it was also a period of time where I wasn't able to get out to movie theaters as often. So my movie watching had kind of stagnated just a little bit. And so I just sort of passed it by. And then it kind of got out of sight, out of mind for a long time. And I'd hear about it, and it'd get mentioned a lot. And people would tell me, Edge of Tomorrow was great, Edge of Tomorrow. And then I saw the tagline, Live, Die, Repeat, which is a much better title.
And it was on the poster, and it confused so many people when this movie came out. There was weird marketing behind this.
Well, and it's funny because then I'm reading about, and I remember seeing like DVD and Blu-ray cases where Live, Die, Repeat was big up at top, and then down at the bottom, Edge of Tomorrow. And even like the spine would be like Live, Die, Repeat.
Yes, it's very strange.
So it was just weird marketing, and it felt like they didn't quite know what they were doing. And the movie had a big budget. It was a $178 million estimated budget to make this. It made about $100 million in the U.S., which isn't that good compared to that budget. Like
next to that budget, for sure.
It did go on to make 300 something million worldwide. So like it turned a profit. It did okay, but it wasn't the big tentpole blockbuster that I think they were kind of hoping that it was. But it did pick up steam on home video. A lot of people then ended up seeing it and loving it. Now, my first try with the movie, and I knew the concept. I had heard that much of it, but I try not to get a movie spoiled for myself. For the most part, I don't really care about spoilers personally. Like, I try not to spoil movies for other people, because I don't want to take that experience away from them. So oftentimes I will preface something by saying, look, I saw this movie. If you don't want me to spoil it, tell me now, and we won't discuss anything about it. But I have certain friends that don't care, so I can talk to them. Sure. I try to avoid them, but I knew the Groundhog Day sort of aspect, the time loop aspect of this. I learned over the years. I gotta say, I had a good time with this movie. This is a fun action movie.
This movie is fun. I think it stumbles a little bit, and I have this could be something that's setting in because I notice it more with age. The shaky cam I have a lot of issue with. Shaky cam and the sort of the big battle scenes felt like Transformers, Michael Bay battle scenes. They were a little hard to follow. There was just sensory overload. But the nuts and bolts of this movie is really fun. Like, my wife came home from work, and I was maybe 15 minutes into this, and she goes, "Oh, I remember this movie. This movie is fun," and sat down. We blew off dinner and just ate leftovers on the couch so we could finish watching this movie. We were having a really fun time with it. It's a really great concept that is, I don't know, this reminds me of one of those like Saturday afternoon movies. You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
It just comes on cable and you're lazing around on the couch, and it's just perfect for that.
Yes, it's very much a like Saturday afternoon action flick. The story to me is pretty interesting, but it's not super deep, and it doesn't try to be super deep, but it gives you maybe, a touch more than a B movie would. And there's some the lead, obviously when you have Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt, you're not a B movie. It's a very
right,
big film. But like, it doesn't take itself too seriously, but it also never veers off into the land of parody either.
Right. They very much establish like stakes and a goal in this, and they stick to that, but they do have fun with it. And I think almost the most parody thing, or kind of borderline ridiculous thing in this movie, is Bill Paxton's Kentucky accent. And I say that with love, because I never realized how much I miss Bill Paxton until I see him in something, and I had forgotten he was in this movie as much as he is. And it's like, he's a really fun character in this movie. He's a caricature, but he's chewing scenery and having a good time with it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I'm the same way. I don't think about it, and then I see him in something, and I'm like, oh, man, I just miss like him just popping up in things. Like,
yes,
I mean, literally, my note, because the movie opens up with a scene with Brendan Gleeson, who is a character actor that I love, and
he's awesome.
And that scene was great because it immediately sets the movie up to not be what you expect it to be. Because with all the marketing and everything that I had seen in trailers and imagery, I'm expecting this to be like Tom Cruise is this gung-ho guy who just gets caught in this time loop. And so that opening scene with the general, immediately Tom Cruise's character is no good at what he's supposed to be doing. And it's kind of refreshing to have Tom Cruise playing that guy.
I actually have a real similar note. I'm like, you never see Tom Cruise playing a coward, a weakling, anyone who... The only time I can think of it is something like Born on the 4th of July, where he's playing like a kid in Vietnam, and that's part of the dramatic arc of that character. But like, in an action movie, he's always the most capable guy and the most invincible guy. And here he's really bad at being a soldier, and he dies several times. It's really, really different for Tom Cruise. And
the coward aspect of it, like the second, because you're set up for this whole thing where he's like, I'm going to put you out on the front line with the camera crew, and you're thinking, okay, he's going to go for it. And his immediate thing is like, I don't want to do that. No, please.
Yeah, I don't do that.
Anything but that. Like, and then he tries to blackmail him, and like the general's like, okay, fine. You're not going to go to the front line, and then immediately arrest this man. It's like, oh boy, all right.
His scenes with Brendan Gleeson, that one and the one that comes when they come back around to him later, I think are so much fun because they are butting heads, and it's two really charismatic people doing it, and especially on the second half of the movie when Emily Blunt is there as well.
Yes,
and she's just I don't want to overlook how great she is in this movie because
no, not at all. She's fantastic.
This could have just been that girl boss action Ripley ripoff thing, and she actually builds a character in what she's doing here.
Yeah, and what I love coming back to Gleason is the first time we meet him, Tom Cruise's, Cage, William Cage, Bill Cage, is just, he's like almost worthless. He's a public relations media guy. He's a coward and all of this stuff. And when he comes back, he's now this like hardened soldier. It's the same day for Brendan Gleeson,
Right.
but Tom Cruise is this hardened, well-trained soldier now. But he's also at a point where he doesn't quite know what to do. And so it's like a mirrored image of that first scene while also Tom Cruise being completely different in it. And I loved that. Like
Right.
the dichotomy of those two scenes was a lot of fun. And then having Emily Blunt sitting there in the background with the gun. And even the quick thing where Cage turns around, he's like, "No, look, don't shoot him this time, okay? Let's just..."
Yes.
And
I love the time loop aspects of that where you get a glimpse of, oh, they've done this before. Like,
yeah,
we're not seeing their first time walking through this. It's always really fun.
yeah. I had the note of just Bill Paxton because that just made me happy to see him show up with that mustache
For sure.
and that accent, and just you can tell dude was having a great time. He
Having
was
the time of his life for sure.
just getting to go full ham, and I loved it. And I liked that he very easily could have been, even with the time loop aspect of things, he very easily could have been just in the barracks and that's it. But then you get him in the ship and you get him on the ground and we get to see him doing the same scene over and over. And it's like he's just doing a different riff on it every time. It's just barely different. All these scenes are just barely different enough to keep you interested without feeling like there's some sort of branching time loop thing going on either, like branching timelines.
Yeah, there's no variation in what's happening.
Yeah.
Except for what Cruise is bringing in when he's like saying the next line ahead of him. But the aspect outside of the movie of Bill Paxton I liked is now we've gone from seeing him as Hudson, the wise ass PFC, and talking to, I can't remember their platoon sergeant's name in Aliens, who's like, "Look into my eye," and and now he's that guy.
Yes.
And Tom Cruise is the private, and it's almost like this full circle, like the full military career of Bill Paxton in these two movies, and it's so funny to watch him kind of mature into that role where he can be believable as the hard ass sergeant.
Yeah, while still like he's believable as that hard ass sergeant while still making you laugh. Because
still having a charisma.
It's still that Bill Paxton charisma, exactly that. So yeah, he goes from his entire career from PFC Hudson all the way to Master Sergeant Farrell, from Science Hill, Kentucky, which was great. I don't know where that is. I don't know if that's even a real city.
I don't know if that's a real place. Yeah,
but I want it to be. I want there to be a Science Hill, Kentucky. We mentioned Emily Blunt and how good she is. She is fantastic in this. The introduction to her in the opening scenes, what I liked about that was we learn about her through dialogue first in those opening news things. And then, she's this mythical figure. And as the movie goes on, it's cool because then I'm remembering back to like that whole thing where, her first day in the suit, she killed hundreds of mimics.
Yeah.
And now you're realizing partway through, it's like, oh yeah, because she went through her own time loop of however many tries.
She played the game over and over.
So, yeah. And I loved that. She brings a great physicality to the role without her character being sexualized, which I liked quite a bit. I mean, with the exception of that one yoga pose she does where she bends up to stand up, she's not like, there's never, the tropey thing where like her armor gets taken off and half of her uniform is missing as she's fighting or some dumb stuff like that. Like they never went that
She's
route.
not wearing the black leather Black Widow suit, know, or something like that.
No boob armor.
I think she's pretty buff without losing her femininity, and feminine without being sexualized in this movie. I feel like the one hiccup I have with that is that the love story between her and Cruz just felt completely shoehorned and forced because I get they were getting to know each other, but it's always that thing where it's sort of like, I just wish they had just been fellow soldiers together who developed a friendship like this. I never bought the romantic relationship of the two.
It's interesting because I'm with you in that I don't buy it as a romantic relationship, but I kind of get this feeling. We never get a sense of how many times Cage went through this loop. We know her because she said, or we have a rough idea for her experience when she says she saw her commanding officer die 300 times. But we never get the full sense of how long was he stuck in this loop, because we get that montage of his death after death after death as he's training. And the first time around where it's just him having no clue what's going on and slowly figuring it out. And then he meets her, and then it's the second montage of all the times that they're training where it just ends with her shooting him in the head, which also made me laugh a lot. So good. I was reading a thing where they talked about if they were branching timelines, how many of those branching timelines is she court-martialed for killing a fellow soldier in cold blood, like in the training room. But the romance thing, the interesting thing to me with that was the way they played it was he sees her, and there is that moment of kind of, whoa, when he sees her on the battlefield, because she is this mythical figure. But then as he gets to know her and he gets to train with her, you start to get this inkling like he's developing feelings for her, but it sort of goes in this direction of there is romantic feelings, but it's also like this idea that when we get to the scene in the farmhouse and the garage where he's finally realized, like, I can't save you. Like, no matter what I do, you die. I don't want that to happen. And it's got that really, really heartfelt line where he says, I wish I didn't know you, but I do.
Yeah.
Where I think it kind of passed from being sort of a pseudo-romantic relationship to kind of that foxhole soldier respect relationship that then, when they go through that final time loop and she kisses him right before they're going to go try to bomb the thing, that's less out of a romance and more out of just kind of like this flood of emotion, I think, more than anything. That's how I kind of perceived it.
Yeah. Because they don't go, anything past that as far as like they never sleep together. They never, not that he didn't try. That was really funny when he thought he could give her the time loop thing like an STD. He goes, have you tried everything? And he does the little like wiggle his hips move in the mech suit. It's so funny. And she's like, yes, I've tried.
It's so cheeseball. But it's like at the same time, you sort of get like, okay, no, I understand the thought process there.
Yes.
But
I mean, it's Emily Blunt. It's you gotta take a shot. You shoot your shot, right?
Exactly. Exactly. You're going to reset the day anyway, so.
There's no consequence. But the whole aspect of them getting to know each other and the amount of times that he's gone through this day, there is all the montages and all the clips that we see, but there's also a ton more that we don't see, like the farmhouse thing when they find the helicopter and he says, we've played out every scenario. There's no way that and you get a sense of like, Oh, they've been to this farmhouse like 100 times probably. Like
Yeah.
it, and it's just it's almost like the thing in I brought it up. I can't help compare it, but like the thing in Groundhog Day where people have talked about like, you know, Bill Murray, was he in Punxsutawney for 1,000 years or
Oh
something
yeah.
like that?
Yeah.
There's this evidence that he like lived several lifetimes there, and it's just sort of like I think it mounts up the more the movie goes on. You just realize like, oh, Tom Cruise has been fighting this one day's battle for 10, 20 years, maybe. I don't know. It just feels like an infinite time loop
It
at a
really,
certain point.
yeah, it really does. And I dug that because that, again, that farmhouse scene is the emotional kind of crux of this movie. And for it to play out the way it does, because we keep getting, just a little bit further and a little bit further, and we finally get to that point, and here we go into it with this sense of like, okay, they've finally gotten this far, and then we learn, no, they've gotten this far however many times, and she calls him out on
Right.
that, and it's an emotional scene that then changes the movie after that, because after this, he's like, all right, well, we got to go with a different tactic now, because I've tried everything, including letting you die and getting to the dam, and the thing isn't there. So now we've got to go in a different
Right.
direction. Like, he had given up at that point. He had kind of that was his sort of breaking point, in that he was done. He's like, well, I can't save her anymore. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. And then it didn't work. And so now he's
There is that scene where he tries to go without her,
Mhm.
where he approaches her and then he goes, "Oh, I'm sorry to bother you," and then he goes and does it on his own, and yeah, it's just a really like that part of it too. I think added to it where it kind of bookends the farmhouse scene. It's that and the initial when they're on the car ride. And she's
Yeah.
trying to not talk to him. And he's like, I already know all this stuff about you. I've known you. He's basically like, I've known you for years now at this point.
right.
And it's just sort of like you get a sense of an actual relationship, even if she's not aware of it, that he has it on his end.
Yeah, which does actually, because this was based on a book. It's a Japanese novel called All You Need Is Kill that was published in 2004. And then got adapted into a manga and eventually this movie. And that kind of mirrors a little bit what happened. So in the book, it's the same characters, except that Tom Cruise's character is a Japanese soldier, and the book is set in Japan. Right. But she's an American soldier in Japan. It's Rita. And in the book, she still has the ability to reset the time loops as well. She didn't lose that.
Okay.
And there's a moment where it ends with her having lost, kind of dropped out of the time loop, but he hasn't, because they figure out there's something that they have to do in order for them to defeat the mimics. And so then it becomes a situation where now he remembers her, but she has no memory of him.
Okay.
And
wow.
so they built,
yeah, punchy.
And like they build this strong relationship, and then from that point forward, at the end, it's like he views her as this, equal and friend and fellow soldier, and she views him as a stranger. And so it's kind of interesting the way that the movie doesn't go that route. It did give us a more uplifting ending with everything resetting, and I'm kind of curious. I loved how it ends in the movie, because it gives you the open-ended of, does she remember him or not?
Right.
Which I thought was really cool.
It's the thing of, they wanted this to be a blockbuster, $100 and whatever $million movie.
Yep.
That they sunk into it. They're not going to give it that downer ending.
No.
They want that Hollywood. They want you to leave the theater feeling good and telling people to come see this movie, and that's just what you get with the blockbuster. But I really like that book ending. Honestly, it's a downer, but it feels more emotional.
It does. They definitely did change. And I know one of the things I was reading was that Tom Cruise really wanted to emphasize some of the comedy of like the dying over and over.
Right.
While to kind of keep it lighter, because it's fairly heavy. I mean, obviously war is heavy stuff and war with aliens and all of that. But what I liked about it, and I sort of mentioned this earlier, is that it didn't stray too far. It didn't over lean on the comedy, but still was like lighter in that way. Because there's moments where it's just the again, or wait, no, I'm okay, and then she shoots him anyway, or the rolling under the truck to get away during the push-ups, the first attempt not working, which has probably the best Bill Paxton reaction, which is just, what were you thinking? Plus and we'll get to it later, but the scream, the Tom Cruise scream when he gets run over by the truck, it really made me laugh. It's a cool story, and again, it's not super deep, but it's deeper than, like, it can make you think a little bit more, because there are kind of levels to this that you could dive into if you want to. It's a very high concept thing.
The concept is the standout thing in this movie, I think.
Yeah, I'm always a big fan of high concept sci-fi. I love, like, when you're going to go with sci-fi, go for it, and sometimes just do it, and don't, like, we don't get some scene that over explains where the aliens came from, what they're doing here, what their supposed plan is. We don't have the war room scene, right, with like the leaders of the world talking about the alien invasion.
Oh yeah.
Or any sort of, we don't get a scene that explains the mech suits. They just have them and they work. The book does, which this is cool. This is where adaptation of a story is important, because in the book, the mech suits are custom built per person, and the way the technology works on them is it's like electrical impulses to move things around and give you the super speed and strength and everything, but it's like walking on eggshells and trying not to break them at the same time. Okay. And if you put on someone else's suit, you could just break every bone in your body because it's not calibrated for you. Sure. Which conceptually is really, really cool, but in a movie just doesn't work. Like, you don't have the time to go over that without it being an entire 5 to 10 minute scene to explain that, and then you ignore it for the rest of the movie. So they just skipped all that and are just like, now we got mech suits and they got big rail guns on them that sound exactly like the guns from Aliens, and that's it. That's all you need, because that's not like
a lot of Aliens crossover.
Because all of that really cool, like, minutia isn't important to the story that this movie is telling. If this were a series or like a different movie, that stuff's important. But this one was about get Tom Cruise into the time loop, and then let's figure that part of it out.
That's this is not taking the time for a lot of world building. It just kind of throws you right in. Mm-hmm. But also those mech suits, like, in a real world military, that is how they would work, is that they wouldn't be calibrated to individuals. Correct. It would be a one size fits all. We mass produce these by the lowest bidder, mm-hmm. and the battery will run out exactly when you don't need it to. It is kind of all the things you see in here, and it did make it feel very real, like the idea of booby trapping yours with claymore mines, because eventually the suit's going to let you down and you're going to get overrun. And these kind of weird things, it's
going to work mostly for the most part.
Yeah.
So the other cool thing is her reason for, in the book, it's a battle axe that she carries instead of the big sword.
The big sword,
but it's the same concept. And her reasoning in the book is that guns jam, and they notoriously jam, so she carries that as a better weapon. In the movie, it's just kind of more, she's just a badass. Like, she don't need no guns, even though she's got the wing guns, which those were really cool, where they'd fold. Those would be like wings that would fold up or unfold. The suits that they used in the movie too, and credit to them on this. I have to give Doug Liman and Tom Cruise are most of the ones I was reading about that kind of pushed for it. They made them. They're practical suits that they were wearing for the most part. There's probably some CG extensions to it and extra bits, but they
Sure.
wanted them to look as real as possible because they were originally going to do them all mocap. They were going to do motion capture and add them in later, and they wanted the more authenticity to it, which also meant that they weighed like 90 pounds apiece.
I was gonna say, like, that cannot have been a fun day on set.
So yeah, no.
Wearing
Apparently Emily Blunt like just started crying the first time she put it on because it was so heavy and she wasn't sure she could
So
do
heavy,
anything in
yeah.
it. To which Tom Cruise just kind of looks at her and it's like, just I can't repeat what he said on the show, but it was enough to get her to like. It was so unexpected from him that she just started laughing and was fine after that apparently. But it's just it's an extra layer that, yes, it adds budget to the movie, but it also adds a better visual look to it because I think, as you mentioned, this movie's almost 10 years old. And quite honestly, if these were CG motion captured suits from 10 years ago, the amount of them that they would have, I do feel like that wouldn't have aged quite as well. There's something
Nah, probably
about that
not.
tactile nature of seeing Tom Cruise in that ridiculous suit trying to run. Which we did get Tom Cruise sprinting. We got him
in the suit. Yeah.
we got him sprinting in the movie, in both the suit and in the first part where he tries to run out of the general's office.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
we got-
Dazed.
So we got the Tom Cruise sprint. We got the Tom Cruise riding a motorcycle,
Yep.
and there was also a helicopter in the movie. So, we hit all the cruise tropes.
We got him jumping out of a plane.
Yep.
I don't know if we got shirtless Tom Cruise. I don't know if we got laughing. The Tom, the Tom Cruise laugh. I don't know if we got all the moves, but
No,
yeah,
not
we
quite
got
all of
the
them.
greatest hits.
We did.
Yeah.
We did get the greatest hits. And of course he did all his own stunts. I mean, that's par for the course for him at this point. Emily Blunt did all her own stunts, except in the reshoots, because they did the reshoots a couple months later, and by then she was in the very early stages of her pregnancy. And so
Come on, man up. God, you know.
what's funny about it is she gets back for the reshoots and then she suddenly doesn't want to do the stunts, and it's sort of confusing a few folks, and she finally she says she went to Tom Cruise and was like, yeah, I'm pregnant, so I probably shouldn't do those. And she's like, basically my husband, one friend of ours, and Tom Cruise knew that I was pregnant at that point.
Right.
It's like, well, I mean, but
yeah, no, I get it.
but
Can I talk about Emily Blunt just real quick?
Yes, absolutely.
I really like her in this movie. A big blind spot for me until recently was Sicario, and I just watched Sicario a couple months ago, and she is freaking amazing in that. Like, she's one of these actors, like, I knew she had chops. I love her in A Quiet Place. I've seen her in a handful of things, and I'm like, oh, Emily Blunt's great. But I saw her in Sicario, and it completely changed how I saw her as an actor. I think she is she's playing a real tragic and tortured person in Sicario, and I think she does it amazingly. And she's in a cast full of just absolute heavyweights in that movie, and she just blows me away. And then to come see her in I love her in A Quiet Place, and in this, and see how she does in like genre, action.
yeah,
And it's like she's not looking at it like, well, this is a dumb alien movie, I'm gonna phone this in. She's doing like real character work in this movie, and that farmhouse scene I know is the kind of go-to emotional scene, but I think through all of this, when she kind of comes to realize who Tom Cruise is, and she's like, oh, he starts taking him seriously. You see it all play out without her saying a whole lot. I think she's an amazingly underrated actor.
oh, absolutely. I mean, and versatile too. Like, she's not just sometimes actors get caught not just like typecasting, but it's like they just kind of do the same stuff. You get the rom-com actors, and
Sure.
we're seeing more and more actors do try to branch out, and some of it is us as an audience need to be receptive to that. yes, it can be kind of silly to think of Seth Rogen in like an action film, but there's nothing to say that he couldn't do that as an actor. It's just you gotta see it on screen, but you also have to be willing to see it on screen, kind of thing. It's
Seth Rogen has done some great dramatic roles, that nobody 10 years ago would ever think that he would be doing. Like it's true.
Yeah, and I love that like Emily Blunt has all sorts of stuff from the Wolfman remake to like voice work in Romeo and Juliet.
I totally forgot about that movie.
I remember it because we recently on another podcast I do, Gore, we did the original Wolfman, the 1941 Wolfman, and the subject of the remake came up. But like all sorts of stuff. I mean, she was in things like The Devil Wears Prada. She was in Looper. I liked her in Looper. Another genre film she's in.
How did I forget that? Yes, she's great in Looper, and I love that movie so much.
But she has like there's a presence she has that there's a confidence that she can bring to a role, even when she's doing something. I don't know. It's a charisma that she's got that is just, it shows on screen in whatever it is that she's doing, but it sort of adapts to the roles that she's playing, which I really, really liked.
Absolutely.
And also she was in a Muppet movie. So she was Miss Piggy's receptionist in The Muppets from 2011, which immediately makes her better. But Sicario, you mentioned, she did voice work for My Little Pony, the movie. Mary Poppins Returns. I loved her. Honestly, I loved her as Mary Poppins in that. I thought that
honestly have still not seen that movie, but
it was fun.
It has less to do with me thinking that movie will be bad and more of I cling to the original Mary Poppins movie as the greatest thing Disney's ever done, and I'm like, man, I just don't want to be disappointed by a sequel.
It's, if you go into it not expecting it to be that original movie and kind of don't have that movie on its pedestal, do what you're going to do with that. This is a great love letter to it, and they earnestly were trying to do something that I think they did a pretty good job.
I've heard
with.
It's really good. I haven't even heard bad word of mouth about it. It's just
But I understand. There are sometimes there's those certain movies where you're just like, you're tentative about it. You're tentative to like to open up to it because that original is so precious. And like Mary Poppins is a great one for that, because Mary Poppins is a fantastic movie.
It's just a classic for sure. Yeah.
But yeah, I really enjoyed Emily Blunt in this. And then you had like the whole J Squad, were a little, if I have a complaint, it's that they're a little underutilized.
And they're a little generic. They feel like they are the dollar store versions of the crew from Aliens. Again, to come back around to that, it's almost like, oh, we got the sassy woman who's supposed to be like Vasquez, and but you gotta love the big dude who's naked in his mech suit, and
that did crack me up.
They try and give some dimension to. There's the young black dude who's like pretending to be someone else who was killed in combat, and they're trying to give some depth to these crew, but you're right, they're not there enough for you to really latch onto them.
No, it was cool to come back to them and bring them in for the final scene. Unfortunately, in order to really give them enough screen time, this movie's going to end up 2.5 hours long, and
right.
I don't know if I could make it through 2.5 hours of this movie. Like, the pacing that it has is just about right, and it comes in just a tick under 2 hours, and I think that's good. About an hour 50.
I think that's pushing it, but it lands just about right. You're right. Another half hour of this would have been tedious, I think.
Now, I think if you take this concept and you had stretched it out over, say, like a mini series type thing, there you can develop this J Squad. Because I think that the actors they had would have been fun. Franz Drama, I think is how you pronounce that. Ford. I love him. I've loved him since I saw him in DC's Legends of Tomorrow, and then I saw him again in Attack the Block. a couple of years ago, and
Attack the Block keeps coming up again and again, and I've not seen that movie in years, and I'm like, I just need to revisit that movie. I just need to bite the bullet and watch it. I remember really liking it, and now people are like, oh, this guy's in it. This guy's in it. These people have gone on to be famous who were nobodies at the time, so you didn't take note of them.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, man, it's like a deja vu thing with that movie. It just keeps coming up in my life. So,
but he's just one of those. He's another guy. He is somebody that I feel like he and John Boyega both deserve to get more roles because they have
better roles.
Yeah, they have a real good charisma about them and a good screen presence. I love seeing them. It cracked me up. Probably my favorite, like the thing that made me laugh the most, outside of Tom Cruise getting run over by the truck, was when he goes back to them at the end of the movie, to the J Squad, and he's explaining to everybody who they are and like what he knows about them. And he's like, Kimmel, you fight balls out, literally.
Literally,
because he just goes into battle in a jockstrap, and it just
he says, "I gotta be free." It's the funniest thing.
It's such a silly, tropey thing, but it made me laugh. And then for Tom Cruise to deliver the line that way, and there's again that leaning into the comedy without it being slapstick, letting it be funny without like overdoing
that balance. I think really, really well, and it's kind of when you look back at like Doug Liman, the director, like you forget how varied his career has been. I forgot he was the director of Swingers,
right?
You know, before he did the Bourne movies, and before he got into doing like more dramatic. He does this movie with Tom Cruise a few years ago, American Made, about the pilot who smuggles for the CIA, and that movie's like just a good kind of biopic drama. And I just, his career is all over the place. So I think he's really able to balance, like, here's my comedy chops, and here's my action movie chops, and kind of figure out how to not lean too far in either direction. I think it's a really delicate balance he strikes here.
Yeah. You know, I always think of him as the director of The Bourne Identity, because he did that first movie and they didn't bring him back
before Greengrass took over. Yeah.
But I'm the same way. I forget that he did Swingers, which is so different from the Bourne movie. And then he turns around and he does, a couple years after The Bourne Identity, he does Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which is like, that's kind of his first sort of action comedy, real mesh. And you see some of that in this
movie.
I did too.
It's a kind of a silly movie, but I think it's so much fun.
Well, it's a movie that knows what it's trying to be, kind of like Edge of Tomorrow, kind of like it knows exactly what it wants to be, which is kind of just popcorny, dumb silliness with some fun action in it. And the thing that Lyman does really well, I think, is stage action. Yes, the stuff on the beach in this gets really hectic, and there is a little bit of shaky cam in there. But I also think, like, in a way, that's on purpose because he's sort of redoing and doing his own PG-13 take on the Saving Private Ryan type.
Saving Private
scene.
Ryan, yeah.
So, but like the guy knows how to do action and make it in such a way that you are engaged in what's going on without losing perspective on where things are going on. You usually can figure out the geography of his scenes and where everybody is supposed to be. Even in this, this movie was kind of coming out that early 2010s to like it's like 2008 to 15. There was this period where a lot of stuff had very muted colors and very muted palettes.
Yeah.
And this one does have that too, especially the battle scenes are a lot of browns and dark grays on a gray back sky. It just sort of it was the visual style going on at the time. And so it can be tougher to kind of figure things out, but I think Lyman does a good job of sort of keeping you in the moment of all the scenes that are going on. So I appreciate that. And
Lyman knows his geography, and he knows how to show it without a lot of tangential stuff screwing up shot to shot.
Yeah.
It's funny you talk about the color palettes because Austin and I watched Pandorum from, I think it's like 2008. It's like Dennis Quaid. It's a sci-fi
Pandorum
movie.
Yep.
And that whole thing is shot with like a brown filter. It has like this. It looks like a Nine Inch Nails video.
Yeah.
And I remember we talked about it on the show, and I was like, you can tell just by the color palette of this movie exactly when this movie came out. Like like this small time frame where that was it. Is just these high saturation filters that took all the color out of the room. and it's real specific.
Yeah, and that's that same era. It's at 2009 was Pandorum, and it's just for whatever reason that period of time we desaturated everything and made everything these, I don't want to say boring, but kind of boring color palettes.
It was like trying to look real gritty all the time.
There was an overly gritty nature to everything.
And looking back, it just hasn't aged well at all, really.
No, I do.
As far as color palettes go.
Yeah, I do like when things can, like, not everything has to be overly stylized, but I think just a more natural look to things can work. Unless what you're doing is like The Crow, where you're mimicking a black and white comic.
Sure.
And so back then they were doing it on film, so they were doing the silver, silver bypass, I think it's called, or something, where the way they would wash the film during development.
It's been a long time since I worked in a dark room, but yeah, there's something about the silver.
I can't remember the name of the process, but
in the chemical, like the silver nitrate or whatever
Yeah.
it is, that they up that to give it a different finish. Yeah.
Yeah. So there is that, but I feel like, and especially as, you know, kind of that 08 to 15 era was also the boom of digital. The switch from film being the main thing to digital photography being the main thing in films. That you feel that that there's something about the desaturated nature of like a film thing. Like The Crow is one that I like to use because it had that look, but there's other movies that did it too. Versus the way it's done with, especially earlier digital stuff. I remember that was one of my issues with Miami Vice. The movie was
the Michael Mann movie.
Yeah, was that Michael Mann did that kind of he was trying to create that look, but in early digital, it just doesn't look great.
No.
By the time of this movie, 10 years later, they got better
issues with the Miami Vice movie, but
I did too. But overall, I think the look of this is pretty good, and it gets better when you get away from the beach scenes. The color gets a little bit better, right up until the end. That end at night, very CG heavy. You can tell a lot of this was shot on sound stages, which is fine. Like it gave it a good look.
You can't really go flood the Louvre.
No, unfortunately,
film there. You kind of got to do it that way.
They frown on that.
I give some of the desaturation a pass, especially in like the beach and on the army bases and stuff. Just because it had a lot of the stuff had that Star Wars quality of like, this is really old, beaten up gear. Like the weird transports they were on and the mech suits. I liked that they were a little tarnished and colorless and kind of dirty looking, because that's, it added some texture that felt authentic to what they were trying to portray.
Yeah.
But you're right. When they get out in the farmhouse and they are driving in the country, you get a little more greenery, and it is like, okay, we're getting back to like a living world now, and that felt better.
Yeah, because you definitely on the base and on the beach, it's that feeling of like, no, they're losing this war. Like the humans are to the mimics, they are straight up losing this war. That's, I guess, I don't remember any explicit like dates being shown, but it's supposedly the meteor hit in like 2015, and the movie takes place in 2020 in this timeline. So they've been at it for 5 years, and they're basically just, getting their butts handed to them.
Yeah, I was really confused about that because there's the part where he goes into the bar.
Mm-hmm.
He basically skips the war that day.
Yeah.
And there's these old guys in there talking about, oh, I was on the beach at Normandy, and I was, and I'm just sort of like, wait, how old are these guys? Like, they would be like, it's a weird timeline.
Was it that, or were they talking about I think they were talking about their dad or uncle, maybe. So that might have
okay.
That might have worked a little bit more.
Maybe I misheard that, but yeah, because that threw me off. I'm like, is this supposed to take place in like an alternate now? Like what is that? But yeah.
There were a couple of characters that
matters.
Like, there was a character in the end that I don't remember from any other part of the movie. And it was the first guy that was on the rail guns when they're flying in on their transport into the Louvre. And there was, it looked like a Japanese character maybe on like where you see Ford ends up getting on those guns afterwards. But the first guy that was on there, he's credited in the movie as Takeda. I don't remember him in any scene prior to that.
Neither do I. I think there was like J Squad had like 6 named characters, but when they go out for a formation run, there's like 30 of them.
Yeah.
So it is just sort of like, okay. And, it's and all the rest.
Yeah.
The Gilligan's Island thing.
And I was watching that scene and I'm like, who's this dude? Like, we haven't seen this guy yet. All right, cool. We'll just go with that.
Yeah, I guess he's just part of the crew. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you catch in the opening newsreel kind of thing where they were skipping back and forth? Did you catch the War Games background on what Tom Cruise was in front of?
I did not. No.
Apparently they grabbed some backgrounds from War Games and of NORAD and threw it behind him on one of those.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Which I thought was pretty fun. Yeah, this is very much Groundhog Day meets Starship Troopers. That's the perfect way to put it. The writers of this, so there were a few different writers. It started off as a spec script when they kind of optioned the novel, and that got sold to the studio, and then it went through several rewrites. But 2 of the writers in particular that are credited, one is Jez Butterworth, and he's written things like, did you ever see a movie called The Last Legion with Colin Firth?
No. I don't know that one. It's
a smaller movie from 2007. It's actually from the Dino De Laurentiis company, but it's basically a B movie, but it's about one of the last emperors of Rome while it's being sacked by the Goths, taking off with his his protector and his teacher and everybody, and they head to Britannia, where the last legion of Roman soldiers are, to get the Caesar safe. The kid, it's a kid, okay. But he co-wrote that. It was kind of an interesting little movie. It's a fun one. He wrote this, Get On Up, which has
the James Brown movie.
The James Brown movie, Black Mass. He co-wrote the screenplay.
I love Black Mass. Yeah.
He was one of the many writers that was involved in Spectre for James Bond, Ford versus Ferrari. Okay. So he's written some stuff that's pretty decent. And then the other one, and he came in kind of later in the project, and he's worked with Tom Cruise a few times, Christopher McQuarrie, who has written, one of my favorite movies of all time, The Usual Suspects. McQuarrie wrote, but he also wrote The Way of the Gun, Valkyrie. He had worked with Tom Cruise on Jack Reacher, which he wrote and directed. McQuarrie did. And then he also wrote and directed the last 2 Mission Impossibles. And the newest one that hasn't come out yet is also McQuarrie. And there's I can feel a little bit of that McQuarrie kind of stuff in some of the moments in this, because he does do a pretty good job of balancing humor and action. But I did love this quote where he at one point was thinking about involving a twist with the mimics kind of figuring out Cage's attack plan in Paris, and so resetting time during that, the mimics doing that. But he eventually was like, I had to scrap it because by that point you were just too exhausted with everything going on.
You're getting too complicated too late in the movie at that point.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. That's like that to me is a sign of a good writer, because the story guy in me is like, no, that's cool, add that twist in. But then you think about it and it's like, no, we've already taken you on this roller coaster far enough. At some point we've got to slow things down for the end.
Everyone has that creative side where they just want to get wilder and wilder, and then you have to balance that with the side of you that goes, "I want to sell this too."
Yes.
So we have to we have to pull this back a little bit.
I want people to watch this and enjoy it. So,
I want people to have a good experience, and yeah. I didn't realize he had written Valkyrie.
Yeah,
which is I know. Let's not pretend like Tom Cruise isn't some brand of problematic, and Bryan Singer directed that movie. So I feel like that movie has been sort of pushed to the side, and it's one of those things like, oh, we don't want to acknowledge this too much. But just taken as a movie, I think Valkyrie is a really solid movie. I really like that movie a lot.
In a vacuum for his
In a
work,
vacuum, yes.
The work that Bryan Singer has put on screen, I very much like. Whether it's The Usual Suspects, the first couple of X-Men films, Valkyrie. Him as a person, no.
Yeah.
You know, much like Kevin Spacey, unfortunately, and whatnot. But they've done very good work. So I'm with you on that. Like, Valkyrie is one of those that if you can separate yourself from who the person is that made it,
your mileage varies a lot on all of that stuff.
Absolutely.
You know? It's up to you as an individual, I think.
But yeah, Macquarie wrote that. If you ever get a chance, The Way of the Gun is an interesting movie. I don't know that I would call it great, but I think that I enjoyed it for what it was, which is it was kind of almost a samurai film, but set with like it's Benicio del Toro and Ryan Phillippe, and they're I think they're, if I remember right, they're like hitmen of some sort, but it's got them in it. Jeffrey and Juliette Lewis, I think, are both in it. And it's got mob stuff and all. It's an interesting movie. Yeah, Juliette Lewis, who I think she's playing like a surrogate mother in the movie, or something's going. It's odd. It's a little out there, but I thought it was better than a lot of people did. Critics gave it, it's like a 49 Metascore, so it didn't rate very well with critics, but I enjoyed it. It also came out in 2000, so I think James Caan might be in it too, if I remember.
Is it anything like Ghost Dog, that Forrest Whitaker movie? It's like a samurai movie crossed with a hitman movie.
In a way, yes, but this is more like where Ghost Dog was very much samurai influence. This is more like
blatantly, yeah.
Yeah, this is more like tonally influence. This would be like comparing the Magnificent
like
Seven
westerns.
Yeah, like the Magnificent Seven and Seven Samurai, where you're taking that samurai storytelling style and transposing it into something else. So it does have a little bit of that Western feel to it as well.
I vaguely remember when that movie came out, and but I never saw it. Maybe I'll look for it streaming somewhere and give it a look.
I think it's worth it, and I think Macquarie too, with Rogue Nation and Mission Impossible Fallout, has done some really good stuff. Those are good, like real good action.
Well, those are fun movies. The Mission Impossible movies are. I always describe them as it's the franchise. I go to all of them. I watch them. I have a great time. I leave the theater and I don't think about them anymore. I could not tell you what stunt happens in which movie, but I know I've had a great time watching all of from 3 on. I really do. I have a great time. I see a lot of them in the theater. And then I just don't ever think about them again until I see them again. And that sounds like a dig, but I don't mean it that way. I think they're just fun experiences that you're having at the time.
The Mission Impossible movies, for me, I feel like, and honestly, I can sit down and watch any of them, even 1 and 2. 2 being my least favorite, but it's not so much because it's a bad movie. It's just not a good Mission Impossible movie. It's a great John Woo movie.
No, it's not.
As just a straight John Woo action flick, I think it's fine.
It's an American John Woo movie. It's
okay,
fine.
fair.
Yeah.
An American John Woo.
There's a different school of John Woo, though.
You're right. No, you're not wrong there. But it's still watchable. If I was scrolling through channels and it was a Saturday afternoon, I'm like, oh, Mission Impossible. Why not Mission Impossible 2? It's got Gray Scott in it. But the Mission Impossible movies are kind of like a good burger. You don't like when you go out somewhere and you get a real good hamburger, cheeseburger, whatever it is, you enjoy it. It's amazing, but you don't then crave and think about that later on necessarily.
You don't write home about it. Yeah.
But then when you're back at that place, you're like, there. Oh, that's right. That burger was good. And I'm going to have another one.
That's a great way to put it, man.
So I enjoy the hell out of them. And plus, the Mission Impossible 4 is the one with the Burj Khalifa where he's climbing the building on the outside of the building.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
In the UAE. And that one, just the stones on Tom Cruise to do that stunt himself. Even if he's not, actually 300 stories up or whatever it is, he's only 20. Sure. Like, still, just come on, man. And it has my favorite, probably my favorite Ethan Hunt moment when he's hanging from the rope and he doesn't have enough to make it. And Jeremy Renner's character's like, you don't have enough rope. And he just looks at him and he's just like, no shit.
No shit.
Kills me every time.
Whenever you see the unflappable character kind of let it down, like the moment I always go to is in Temple of Doom when they're closing in on Indy on the rope bridge and he just goes, oh shit. Yep. Like he's just, he's finally hit the limit. And I think that's just, you just see it just for a second. They just let you barely see it. And I think that's perfect. It reminds you that they're human beings at the same time.
Yes. But yeah, Edge of Tomorrow, I think a better title would have helped this movie to do better in the box office. Now there is
less confusing marketing. And just, I think the days of just marketing a movie based on, hey, Tom Cruise is in this and expecting that to float it when the rest of your marketing is, wait, what's this movie called again?
Mm-hmm.
I think, there's a lot of weird stuff in the ether around this movie because I expect that this movie would have been huge. I was really surprised you hadn't seen it around gamers because the movie is a video game.
Yeah.
It is meant to mock playing a video game level over and over and over again.
In fact,
and side quests and picking up batteries from, it's all of these things. And you're like, if you had marketed this to gamers, like it would have been the first, like probably the best video game movie ever that's not even based on a video game.
It's funny because a couple of years before, about 5 years before this movie came out, was that movie with Gerard Butler called Gamer that was kind of marketed in that way. It's not as good of a movie, but it's the B movie version of what this is trying to be, which is something that took the video game idea. In this one, they're prisoners, I think, and they're being controlled by gamers. So there's actually like people playing the video game are controlling these like avatars essentially, and then something happens and he kind of breaks out of that, and it's a little different. So it's a different type of high concept sci-fi, but like it wants to go in that direction. And I feel like, this movie Edge of Tomorrow needed to be marketed more in that direction. And I think they could have found, because even the writer of the original novel said that he was influenced by video games and being able to replay a level over and
sure.
over and get it right.
I mean, it's undeniable, really.
So I'm glad that I saw this because I do think that is worth seeing. It's also worth capturing a few clips of because they were great. I got a lot of Bill Paxton.
Great.
Even though his screen time isn't that long, like when you first meet him and he immediately says,
We're fixing to invade France.
"We're fixing to invade France." That's only Bill Paxton delivers something like that, and you can hear the smirk that he has while he's saying that.
Oh, he's like the shit-eating grin vocally in most of the things he's saying.
Yes.
You know, like it's perfect.
This one I just labeled T-.
We're T-minus whole last 8 hour.
Oh yeah. After he makes his the J Squad eat their playing cards from their game, which that was a fun gag that they did over and over.
Right.
My favorite one being when Cruz just runs in, quick covers up the cards and just gives him a wink. Like they have no idea who this dude is, and he does that. That one got me, but
You might call that notion ironic.
I might keep that one. Just calling that notion ironic.
Yeah, you could get some use out of that.
I think so. What is this one? Believe. I got a couple of exchanges between Tom Cruise and Bill Paxton.
You're not going to believe what I'm about to tell you.
No, I'm not.
Just very matter of fact. No, I am not. My new favorite city or new favorite town in Kentucky.
Why they call it Science Hill?
Never asked. Don't care.
Never asked. Don't care.
And it was at that moment that I'm like, oh, he doesn't like him. Okay, now I know where we're going. You mentioned the no nonsense female soldier who's basically Vasquez.
Oh yeah,
and she does have this great line when they're running, when they're doing their PT.
Why don't you two get yourselves a nice hot cup and shut the hell up?
I'm always tickled with dialogue like that. Lines
fun
like
banter in this movie for sure. Yeah,
like a warm glass of shut the hell up. Another thing, so there's a few things that I will always capture in any movie that I'm watching. There'll be laughs, forced laughs, or just like really good laughs. They will be odd sounds or screams. I have a few of both of those, but also little things like
Some bitch.
just getting some bitch.
bitch.
Oh man. This might be my favorite Cruise delivery in it.
You're all doomed! You're doomed!
Is that when they're dragging him off to the psych ward?
Yeah.
Or
The first time
the
first time he came back and told him about stuff, and it just smash cut to them dragging him. He's like, "You're all doomed." Just losing it.
Perfect.
Oh, this was the emotional moment.
I wish I didn't know you.
Oh, that's harsh. I
Yeah.
wish I didn't.
It really is.
And it's delivered well, and her reaction to it is pretty incredible.
Oh, Tom Cruise is an actor when he wants to be. When, you know, like, he's turned in some great performances. And even in something not as dramatic, more of an action movie like this, I think he's really capable of dialing that in and delivering a line like, "I wish I didn't know you," and making you believe this guy's heartbroken that he can't save this woman.
Yeah. Yep. And again, that was the moment where it didn't feel like it was because of a romantic interest. It was just more of that exact thing. I can't save you now. I can't. I've been trying so hard and doing so much to try and get you through all this, and I just can't. So yeah, there was that one. And then, okay, laughs. This is, I want to say these are all kind of in sequence when he first is on the beach. And it's just Tom Cruise silly laughs. Like that was in the general's office. That's what that was. That's a pretty good one. But then on the beach you get That's that tired laugh. That's the
Yeah.
oh, I just survived that.
Going hysterical. Yeah.
And also, because that one's just that was the loud one.
That's
I
the
think
Oprah's couch laugh.
it is. I gotta relabel that one, Oprah's couch laugh. And then because it just made me giggle when he rolls under the truck and the first time and the camera follows him and the camera keeps going and you hear that crunch and just as he gets run over. And then you hear the
Wilhelm.
Is a little Wilhelmy. And then you hear the same one later on during his training montage when he's getting just thrown around that training center by those bots.
Oh yeah.
And you hear and that was where they were leaning into the comedy in those moments. They were really making
for sure.
like just the getting to do all the creative ways they can hit him and throw him around that room or have him like get broken and then she just walks up and calmly pulls the pistol out, shoots him, and resets him.
Yeah. Perfect.
Also, a great introduction to her characters. Her first line is, "Come and find me when you wake up."
Oh yeah. No, they that she makes the connection of what he is or who he is or what he's going through, and recognizes that and has that wherewithal to say, you have to come explain this to me. Like, that's all so good. As another layer on top of, I mean, all we know about her up to that point is that the propaganda around her. She's on posters and stuff like that. But yeah, that she has that insight. I think that's a great moment.
Yeah, that one. And then like, what is it when they're talking to the scientist and they're like, yeah, we meet tomorrow. We meet on the beach tomorrow. This is when this all happens.
Right.
Time jokes, always good. No, this is a fun movie. I mean, it took me almost 9 years after it released to see it, but I'm glad that I did. This is you nailed it perfectly earlier in saying that it is a Saturday afternoon little action flick. And I think that's right in. That's not a knock on it, and that's right in kind of Doug Liman's wheelhouse for me. Like when I think of watching The Bourne Identity or Mr. and Mrs. Smith or now this movie, like they are that, you know what? I'm bored. I just want to watch something that's just like cool, you know, a fun little action movie. Doesn't have to have, like, this has obviously world level stakes, but it's such a small story being told. And like Mr. and Mrs. Smith is a couple that also happen to be assassins that don't know that each other are assassins. Like, it's such a silly concept, but like I kind of enjoyed it. And one of the things I liked about The Bourne Identity was that it was, because it was the first in that series, things hadn't gotten so big and convoluted yet.
Right. It was a personal story.
Yeah.
And I'll put on any of those original Bourne movies, the original 3, anytime. Anytime they come on TV, anytime I just need something to watch, I'll watch a Bourne movie any day.
Oh, sure. I would say I watch 1 and 3 probably the most. Identity and Ultimatum. Supremacy is still good, but it's a little, the shaky cam in that bugs me more than it does in Ultimatum. Like, it's almost like Paul Greengrass figured out to pull back at least a little bit by the time he made Ultimatum. I can't watch those or discuss them with a friend of mine, though, because he gets seething anger when he thinks of those movies. He was such a fan of the books. Loved them, would not stop talking about them. I sat next to him in a theater in Orlando, Florida, watching The Bourne Supremacy when it came out in theaters. And like, I'm watching the movie with a passing knowledge of Jason Bourne. I think I had read a Robert Ludlum book by that point, but it wasn't the Bourne book. It was called The Jansen Directive. But I was having an okay time with it, and I could feel the rage pouring off of him for that entire movie. So, that might color my thoughts on Bourne Supremacy just a touch.
Were you in the City Walk Theater? I have to ask in Orlando, the one outside of Universal Studios.
I went to that theater a few times, but that wasn't where I saw Bourne.
Yeah.
I saw Bourne at a different. It was in. I want to say it was like an AMC theater in downtown Winter Park, maybe.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know where Winter Park is.
But yeah, I've been to that theater. In fact, that's where I saw Spider-Man 2.
I saw Hannibal there.
Oh.
And it was the same weekend that. Do you remember a movie called 3,000 Miles to Graceland?
I do.
That movie was opening that weekend, and Christy and I walked into the lobby, and it was full, wall to wall Elvis impersonators. It was the most surreal experience in a movie theater I've ever had. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? It was insane.
That's crazy. One last thing on this movie is it does the tropey trope of keys in the visor of the car.
Oh yeah, where everybody leaves their keys.
Have you ever known a single person to ever leave the keys to their car in the visor?
Honestly, growing up where I grew up, we did used to do that if we were dropping off a car for somebody. I lived in a very small rural town. A lot of times we left the keys in our cars overnight. It was a very different time in a very different place, but we were the exception that proves the rule that people don't do that.
And I've left them in the car before, but I'd always leave it like in a center console or in the glove compartment. Sure. I never knew anybody that left it in the visor, but every movie, like if there's a car in a movie and you're looking for the keys, they're going to be in the visor. If somebody is carrying a bag of groceries, it's going to be a paper bag with a baguette sticking out of it. These are just laws of film. You cannot escape them.
One I heard on a podcast recently was every movie house attic has a bird cage in it for some reason, and I'm like, I
what?
think a bird cage in a steamer trunk. I think that is that is a rule.
Actually, I think so. That's another one of the commandments when it comes to filmmaking.
Oh, the commandments. I like that.
But this is a fun movie. I definitely recommend watching it if you haven't already. And if you haven't watched it in a little while, throw it on. Watch it again. It's on HBO Max right now, so it's easy to find. An hour. If you skip the end credits, it's about an hour and 40 minutes, hour and 45.
Yeah, something like that.
So
I would say everybody involved in this movie has done better movies, but that does not make this movie a slacker. This movie knows exactly what it is, and it's a good time. I had a great time rewatching this. I really appreciate you dropping it in my lap and saying, "Hey, watch this for the show tomorrow." Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have. So, had a good time.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you being on the show. It's always fun having you on, and welcome back anytime, of course. Now, you do a movie podcast with your son.
I do.
I've had both of you on, because I've had Austin on, I've had you on, I've had you both on at the same time.
We've done this a couple times together, yeah. Austin and I do a podcast called The Picture Show with Austin and Phil Rood. We are in our 6th season. We've been going for coming up on 3 years. And currently we are doing a season of double features where I pick a movie and then Austin picks a complement to that movie, and then we switch, and he gets the lead movie and I pick the double feature. Our latest double feature is 2017 Edgar Wright movie Baby Driver that I paired with 1980s The Blues Brothers, because they're both based in music and car chases, and we thought they'd fit well together. We're having a good time with that. We, have always talked movies anyway, so we just put a microphone and a couple of themes and a very loose show doc in front of us. So,
well, it's
you can get it wherever you get podcasts.
Yeah, The Picture Show with Austin and Phil Rood and it's a real fun show. I very much enjoy it, and I like this idea you're doing right now with the pairings, because like that one in particular, Baby Driver and Blues Brothers are both music focused, have car chases, but in very, very different ways.
Different ways. Yeah.
I am such a fan of Edgar Wright that I will watch anything that he makes, but I also really like John Landis, especially 80s John Landis.
Right. Yeah.
And it's really cool to see the different ways that you can do, because you could tell somebody, car chases in the movie and it's got a musical theme to it. And that explains both movies perfectly, but they're so different. So that's really cool. I like that. And I can't wait to hear you guys talk about Blues Brothers.
That just dropped today.
Oh, okay.
Today's Monday, right?
Yes.
Yeah. That just dropped today, and that was an interesting one that really not every movie does this, but this one really pointed out the generation gap between Austin and I, because when I brought this movie up, I'm like, I grew up on this movie. I watched it 100,000 times. It introduced me to all this music, and it's called The Blues Brothers. And he had never even heard of it. Like it was so off his radar. It is so a product of its time that just has not moved forward in the same way. And it's just stuff like that. I really enjoy talking to him, introducing him to movies. He's introduced me to movies, and in that way we both love movies, but we come at it from different directions. And and sometimes we get a really cool mix like that.
Yeah, and there's something about introducing movies to somebody. It's why I started this show, and it's grown to where I get to introduce a lot of movies to people, but I also am getting shown things that I never would have watched on my own.
Right.
And just broadening my horizons, and looking at new stuff and looking at it from a different viewpoint than I maybe would have when I was younger, and it's been great. So I love that you do that with Austin too. And Austin's a good kid, and you guys have a great chemistry on the show together. So it's always enjoyable to listen.
Only on the show. In real life, oh my God,
just can't stand each other. So, but thank you so much, Phil, for being here this week. This has been great. And definitely, folks, check out The Picture Show with Austin and Phil Rood. Now, next week, I've got Cyranex coming back, Sean White, and we are going to talk about John Wick Chapter 3, Parabellum, because John Wick Chapter 4 comes out in about a week and a half, 2 weeks. And so I haven't seen Chapter 3 yet. I've seen the first two. So Cyranex and I are going to talk about it next week, and I'm looking forward to it because these John Wick movies are just fun, crazy action. And also, Chapter 3 has one of my favorites in it, and that is Mark Dacascos. And I want to see him and Keanu Reeves have it out.
And Jason Mantzoukas in the third one as well.
I think so, and also NBA player Boban Marjanovic is in it. And Boban is awesome because he's like 7'4". And so
nice.
I want to see how that goes because he's big, but he moves pretty well for that size. You have to play in the NBA, but I mean, he's surprisingly agile for 7'4". So I'm looking forward to that. And that's going to be coming up next week. Now, this show comes out every week. Usually record Sunday nights. So if you want to catch it live, you can at twitch.tv/TVsTravis. You can also follow me on Twitter or Mastodon or pick your social network. I'm TV's Travis there. But I post about the show. I post my thoughts on stuff. I didn't watch the Oscars last night, but I did pay attention to kind of some of the stuff that won. I was glad to see Everything Everywhere All at Once win a whole bunch because that movie was amazing.
Great movie.
And if you want to support the show, you can do that by spreading the word, letting other people know to subscribe. You can go to patreon.com/WYHS and back the show financially if you want to, for as little as $1 per episode. I do have merch available on my site at tvstravis.com, and you can also find the other shows that I do there. So tvstravis.com or tvstravis anywhere on the internet. It's me. Until next week, Phil, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And until next week, and John Wick, Chapter 3, Parabellum. This has been Wait You Haven't Seen. Get out and enjoy some movies.
look around for the keys. That's productive.
10 minutes,
Okay,
and then I'm killing you.
fine.
Fine.
Such a great exchange.
Oh, so good.